about an 8x increase in the number of incubators since then. And to my mind, this is a remarkable story, and startups have actually created close to over 1 million plus jobs, but they've created over 10 million indirect jobs, and they've contributed to a gig economy of over about 4 million individuals. That has been the remarkable story. So it's a story of growth with a lot of job creation. So it's a story of completely a quantum jump, a meteoric rise, which has been possible because of ease of doing business, because the government, people like Mr. R.K. Singh, Mr. Shivram Krishnan, they've handled, and he told you the story of how from 10,000 crores it's led to about 56,000 crores of money flowing in. We've been able to, the government officers like Mr. R.K. Singh have been able to cut through the regulatory cholesterol and simplified regulations and procedures. So my view is that these startups, if you look at this in many areas, India created the digital identity. But between 2015 to 2017, we opened up 550 million bank accounts. 55% of the bank accounts were opened in India. Every second bank account was opened in India. This has not happened anywhere else in the world. And then we seeded them with Aadhaar. We seeded them with the mobile number. And today we do 46% of the real-time fast payments in the world. Last year we've done close to 128 billion real-time transactions in the world. 128 billion. China was next with just 26 billion real-time fast payments. So the difference between India and China is 128 and 26. That is the real fast payment story of India. But then, from fast payment, you've had a number of, looking at the history of fast payment, you've had a number of startups. If you look at Lending Card, Pine Lab, all them, they started giving credit on the payment history. And then you had a number of startups, look at Zerodha, Grow, Upstock, all of them started taking wealth creation to Tier 2, Tier 3 cities and rural areas. They control over 30% of the stock market from Tier 2, Tier 3 rural areas. These are all young startups who all become unicorn. And then you had a number of young startups like GoDigit, Acco, who started taking insurance to the rural areas, Tier 2, Tier 3 cities. They give, so we do a fast payment in 30 seconds. We do wealth creation, credit in 1 minute. We do stock market in 30-second transaction. We do, when I was growing up, life insurance policy with paperwork used to take me 6 months of trying to establish identity, 6 months. Today we give an insurance policy in less than a minute on the go, on the mobile. All this is a function of young startups disrupting the system and aggressively pushing things. And therefore my belief is that these startups are all national assets. They are all national assets. And that's been the big story of India. My challenge really is that from number 3, we are number 3 in the world. The Prime Minister's vision, and he talked about it just in his last speech, he's thinking big about startups. So the challenge for India is, how do we make India the #1 nation of startups in the world in the next 5 years? That is the challenge. Challenge is, how do you make it #1 in the world in the next 5 years? And I was actually at Stanford, I was lecturing there, and I really saw the whole ecosystem in a very big way. So let me dwell on a couple of things, and my first point is, and that's an onus on the startups of India in a very big way. And I've seen startups growing, and I've seen startups also like Byju, Zilingo, BharatPay, Mechanic, Housing.com, Inframarket, Trell, all of them collapsing as well. So my first point is that there must be corporate governance is key in startups. And with all the leaders sitting here, they must emphasize on corporate governance, because all of you are innovators, you are all risk takers. As you grow and expand, you must ensure that there is proper financial management, there's proper audit, there's self-regulation is key. If there is no self-regulation, regulators will get in, government will get it, and that is, if we want to create a vibrant and creative Indian startup movement, there should be no government intervention, there should be no regulator intervention, because you want to ensure the government regulators stifle innovation. We must understand this. Innovation will always be ahead of regulation. But if there is no corporate governance, regulators will step in, government will step in, and therefore this is really a reflection point for startup. As India becomes a global economic powerhouse, startups must create benchmarks in corporate governance and financial management. They must bring in best practices, and by following these best practices, startups will build trust with stakeholders, they will attract investors and ultimately achieve sustainable growth. That should be the story of India. There should be no lapses. They must adhere to a self-regulating ecosystem with a governance framework, and this will bring in transparency, ethical behavior in our startups. And during the G20, the Startup 20 recommendation, they made very specific recommendation on corporate governance for startups. And my suggestion to all of you is just adopt it as a Bible in addition to following other relevant rules and regulations. This is important. So I wanted to make this point up front that we should not have, if India has to have a story of constant growth, we should not have lapses. Second is that we must ensure orderly exits for venture capital. You know, it's important that we must understand that VCs invest for making money in startups. VC are the fuel on which startups grow. Rajan in the earlier session talked about, that we 3 years back got 40 billion, it's come down, somebody says it's a wing or it's a winter or a spring, just forget all that. Money will always be available to a good startup, a well-managed, good, there will never be shortage of money to a top-class startup which is innovating. And therefore my belief is that, you know, sometimes venture capitalists focus on quantity over quality, they focus on revenue over profitability, sometimes they focus on funding unicorns that disrupt and scale on consumption, and also sometimes they focus on excessively quick targets, very quick exits over sustainable growth. It is to my mind very important that we should focus on growth. My belief is that growth at all costs, sometimes growth at all costs and valuation at all costs sometimes leads to misgovernance. So you are all risk takers. Startups are all risk takers. If you want long-term sustainable growth and a great long-term company, today's startups are tomorrow's great companies for India. Infosys was also a startup once. It became a great company, and therefore if we want a great company, we need to avoid headline grabbing valuations. We need to avoid endorsing as a startup, we need to avoid endorsing Lionel Messi, for instance. It's not called for. Just focus on growth. For there is no need to do excessive valuation or excessive branding. And good governance is really the key to long-term value creation to my mind. Thirdly, my view is, and I repeat this, that all great startups must focus on good audit, good finance, good financial management, have great mentors, and there are many of these great mentors are sitting here. You know, Pramod, Bhasin, Sanjay Nair, all of these guys have created great companies. You can fall back on Ashwini Vaishnav, Mr. Vaishnav, who's running many great people here. So, good mentors, professional boards. A startup cannot be just a self-centered promoter. And lastly, I think this point has been made again and again that India now needs to move on to big tech in a very big way. You know, artificial intelligence is a foundational technology. It's fundamental to growth because no other country has the kind of data which India has. I mean, we have 75 crore internet users. We are adding an internet user every 3 seconds. And therefore, all these areas, if India can find solutions to health, education, nutrition, we'll be finding a solution not merely to India, but for the next 5 billion. Your market is the next 5 billion people who will move from poverty to middle class. So AI, big data, battery, electric vehicles, quantum computing, green hydrogen, these are the big areas of growth. And the Prime Minister has personally driven and opened up a range of areas. He's opened up space, he's opened up geospatials, he's opened up drones, he's opened up defense. All these areas have been opened up. I mean, just look at the space sector. I mean, you have dynamic young startups from Dhruva, Agricool, Cosmos, Skyroot, Aerospace, Pixel. They're all building rockets, engines, satellites, and these are areas where India, because of its cost arbitrage, can take a giant leap forward. And therefore, in all these deep tech areas, we'll need patient capital, and as was rightly said by Mr. R.K. Singh, we'll need a big, deep tech fund of funds, which will deploy resources into AIFs, because much of the startup movement success story has been because we were able to create the fund of funds. The work is really done by venture capitalists. They do the due diligence, but they having done the due diligence, money also, part of the risk taking is done through the fund of funds. And therefore, if we are able to create a patient capital for deep tech, that will be a big story for deep tech to grow and prosper. And the future really lies in deep tech. The other point I want to make is that if you look at the total funding which is coming into the India startup movement, 75% of that funding is still coming from abroad. It's not coming from India. And therefore, it's time that life insurance corporation, all these insurance companies, these pension funds, these high net individuals, the family offices, all of them start putting their money into the Indian startup movement. Their value creation will come with their stake into the Indian startup movement. There's no point in us saying that we'll keep waiting for foreign money to come in. If we've fallen, if there's a winter, Indian companies, Indian large family, high net individuals, insurance companies, pension funds, they must step in a very, very big way, and therefore that will give a huge innovation and a push to this. So I would also say that there is a need to, for us, as RK pointed out, that there is a need to learn from other countries, one of which is Israel. Because when they started innovating in military tech, cyber security, defense equipment, many of these areas, he rightly said this, growth comes when government is the first buyer. Government is the first buyer, government is the first buyer, government is the first buyer. That is, if they are able to aggregate and make the first procurement, then it'll be a biggest catalyst for driving and the big growth in many of these startups which are able to create growth for India. And therefore, my belief is that we need, like IDEX is doing for defense, as he said, you need to create IDEX in 5 or 6 other procurement ministries. Lastly, many people said that there is about women's representation. My view in this is that in this huge push for women-led development by the Prime Minister, and G20 is a great example where we were able to bring women-led development across all the G20 countries, from China to Saudi Arabia. Everybody agreed to women-led development. And therefore, the startup movement of India actually must be driven by the women of India in a very big way. And that is important because we may say we have 45% of the directors are women. That doesn't matter a lot. We need innovators, we need founders, we need innovators as women. And secondly, we need many of the VC funds to be headed by women. Only 3 of the top 20 VC firms in India have a women partner. You look at only 3. India Quotient, Lightspeed India and Kalri Capital are the only 3 VC funds which have a women partner. So women must become the drivers, and all the men sitting here, there's disproportionate representation even on the dais. There's only one lady sitting here. So we need many, many more women. And I would repeat just one more thing, and that is the need for skilled manpower. You know, I mean, if you look at Google, there are 35,000, 40,000 engineers. If you look at, young companies who are doing disruption, there are huge, even OpenAI has 5,000 startup, AI engineers. So you need, basically, to my mind, startup movement requires huge number of product developers. There's a shortage of 1 million new product developers. Now there's a disconnect between what IITs and triple IITs are teaching and what the startup India requires. And therefore, if you want to become the #1 startup nation in the world in the next 5 years, that is the vision of the Prime Minister. All these IITs and triple IITs, their course curriculum must be reoriented for the startups of India. The course curriculum must be that we are going to produce product developers, we must produce AI engineers, we must have prompt engineers, we must have data scientists, we must have machine learners, and that is where the reorientation of the education system is now taking place through the new education policy. So ladies and gentlemen, startups, the future startups lies in all of you imbibing artificial intelligence. As I said, it's the first and foremost a foundational technology. We need to embrace it. The transformative journey of AI will be really a force of good for the startups of India. That will enable you to technologically leapfrog in a very big way, and all of you must actually first become an AI company. First become an AI company and then do everything else. Reverse, re-engineer, completely become an AI company. That will make you transform. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This Mahakumbh, to my mind, is a great event. It really brings a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for India. You will never have a scenario where there is a Prime Minister's own political will. There is an entrepreneurial great spirit and drive here. There is a new education policy which is driving innovation, and there is great administrative determination in the form of Mr. R.K. Singh and his team to drive reforms, change, and to handle the startups of India. This is just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the startup India to become the best and the first and the world's foremost startup ecosystem in the world in the next 5 years. Thank you very much, ladies.